Laura, welcome. Chat with Deb on Mission Accepted podcast. Do you know why we say Mission Accepted?
Tell us.
The suspense of it all. Honestly, isn't that what you do as an entrepreneur? I mean, not only as an artist, this is really the kind of entrepreneurial positioning that you put yourself out there. There's something very unique about being an artist because most artists have a very vested interest in what they're producing because it's a part of who they are.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I've noticed with artists is that it can be challenging to put their work out because they feel like they're being judged, not their work being judged. And so there's this, we've all heard the starving artist, the person that is very attached to their work, doesn't want to let it go, right? Such an interesting process. So tell me, obviously you're multi-talented, you're what I call an entrepreneur. You can throw a party. This is Laura is part of this party.
It was a good night last night, maybe too good.
I brought her a little chew this morning to spurk her up.
Yeah, necessary. Thanks for that, Deb.
But not only that, but you are an artist. So from the heart of being an artist, let's have that conversation today.
Yep.
So what's it like for you to put your art out and have people walk by and see that?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a huge component of the process is getting to that point where you're releasing it, because you can work on it and work on it and work on it. You could work on it forever. And there comes a point where you have to let it go and you have to put it out there, but that is the hardest part. And I think that's why artists need deadlines. They need deadlines. And like for me, personally speaking, without a deadline, I might never put it out. I might never put anything out. And that's why like an event like this is great because, you have all year to work on your pieces, work on what you're going to exhibit, and you know that there's an end line, that there's 4 days in May where this work is going to be on display for all of Vancouver and the world to see. So that helps. Having the deadline helps. Without it, I don't know that I would put anything out there. And that's a huge part of the process as well, as getting to that point, deadline or not, where you're releasing it. Right. And when you're releasing it, you are releasing it to be judged. I mean, we all strive to be non-judgmental, but I mean, let's face it, that's a huge element of it. You're opening yourself up to judgment, criticism, critiques. And at the end of the day, as an artist, really, I think we create the art first and foremost for ourselves, and that's where it starts. It's an expressive medium. It's an opportunity to really express something, whatever that may be. And I think it's staying true to that, and just not letting the rest of it get to you. Just don't let it get to you. Do it for you, you know?
Well, and I know, talking to many artists, and being one, but not to this degree, that there's many artists that are like, I know it went to the right home. I'm so happy that piece went to that person that purchased. Like there's an extension of making sure it goes to a right place. Kind of like when you have your pet and you're like, I'm going to leave it with my neighbor while I go on vacation, and I feel good about that. And then there's some artists that are really able to make that piece, claim it while they're making it, and then really, like you say, release and let it go. So for you, that's incredible. Everybody probably has their little trick on what it was, but having a deadline. So tell us, because I went by your booth last night, exquisite.
Thank you.
And getting to know your work. So tell us about what you chose and why you chose to put this line of work, these multiple pictures, this kind of, there's a philosophy around what you've put up this year. So tell us about
absolutely. And I think, that's another point worth acknowledging. When it comes to art, you can create from a very conceptual place, or you can create from an aesthetic place, or you can create from both places. And for me, I am certainly motivated by conceptual more so than aesthetic. As in, when I am creating the work, I'm not necessarily coming from an aesthetic place from the outset. I mean, that comes after for me. The main motivator, the thing that gets me started, is the message that I'm trying to convey with the work. And so this work, Bordali, was a special project that I've been working on for about 3 years. And that goes back to our early point about letting things go. I mean, it was 3 years before I was able to let this go.
Right.
But that is also a testament to the commitment that's at play. All artists, you know, that commitment that's there. The dolls, I actually found the dolls. So they're very special. I'm very attached to the dolls now because I've, you know, been working with them for 3 years. But I found them on Hastings Street in a Salvation Army, just walking down the street, this big basket of rag dolls. I looked at them, they immediately drew me in, and then I learned they were $2 each. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm getting these. I don't know what I'm doing with them, but I know I'm going to do something with them. And then eventually, in January of last year, I started photographing them, and that's my dominant medium that I work with is photography. And so I started photographing them, and the inspiration behind them, it comes from a world of femininity and female representation, and looking at the rag dolls as discarded beings, and, you know, aligning those similarities, you know, with a lot of experiences that women face in that when they reach a certain threshold, or when their use is fulfilled, that there's this element of being discarded. And so while the dolls are in sort of vulnerable positions, it's very important to me that they come across as sort of strong, autonomous beings as opposed to victimized beings. And that's kind of the main motivator behind this piece, is like creating this awareness and kind of highlighting that we know all of this is going on as women. We know all of this is going on, and it's just reclaiming that narrative. It's funny as well because the Raggedy Ann style doll that I use first appeared, you know, at the turn of the century, the early 1900s, and that was around the same time that we were hearing this phrase, you know, the angel in the house, this philosophy of women as the angel in the house. And it's not a coincidence that the representation of the angel in the house came in the exact same toy form. And while we might have moved away from the rag doll, we're dealing with it now tenfold with Barbie, Polly Pocket, Bratz. And it's essentially a comment on the patriarchal gaze, and that it's always been there, it continues to be there, and it will be there, but that we're acknowledging it as women, like we're acknowledging that we know what's going on around us.
So when people come and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible, and they draw a meaning in relationship to them. Mm-hmm. What's that dialogue like? Because you've made it with a certain purpose and a certain meaning. Mm-hmm. Some people do with their art. Again, some people the art just came itself. Mm-hmm. You found something, and you created a message within that. Someone mm-hmm. else comes in and they see it. Mm-hmm. What do you think that experience is like? Are they picking up on your message in a subtle way? Are they, they have their own memory or relationship to a Raggedy Ann doll? Mm-hmm. What's that like?
Well, again, you know, that's such a crucial part of art, you know, and that, like, yes, I'm producing it with these ideas in mind, but I'm also very aware that I'm going to have an audience that will come and view it, and they're going to see something completely different. Right. And, you know, maybe they identify in a completely different way. And that's great, that's perfect, that's what we want, because that's a huge part of having an event like this as well, is being able to have those conversations. And so you get to meet your buyers, and you know, the buyers get to meet the artists. They get to find out, you know, what was behind the creation of this, and you get to learn the different perspectives, which is always interesting as an artist, because 9 times out of 10 people see something completely different to what you intended it to be. But like that's all great, and that's what it's all about. And going back to your earlier point as well, the comment on, you know, this idea of the painting or the artwork has found its rightful home or gone to its rightful home. That all comes from having events like this and being able to have those conversations where you can connect with the buyer and they can walk away with an original piece of artwork that they almost embarked on a journey on, you know, meeting the artist, learning about it, connecting with it, and keeping that with them forever.
That's a huge part of it, right? Isn't it? It's even when you go to when you go to a restaurant and you meet the chef, like when you get to meet the creator of an experience that you're having, it gets soulful. It gets soulful.
Oh, it gets deep. Yeah. Sometimes it gets too deep. Sometimes it gets weird. Sometimes it gets weird, but that's the fun of it too.
Yeah. So let's flip. Commerce. You're selling your pieces. You're showing your wares. What is it like? Is there a process that an artist goes through? It's like, how do I value my work? How does that show in the price? What's it like to price your pieces?
Yeah, so that again, there's many perspectives and there's many approaches to pricing art. I think there's a couple of branches to it. For example, there's kind of standard templates out there where it's a certain price for a certain square footage.
Okay.
So it's actually priced out, in a very formal way based on a formal template. However, that's not necessarily something that all artists stick to, and it's very dependent on the artists themselves and the work that they're creating, because if you're dealing with an artist that has huge credibility and has, acquired a huge amount of notoriety, well, they don't have to price anything out by square footage, right? They're just going to price it with what they feel it's worth, and they're pricing that based on how much time they invested in it, how much of themselves did they put into it, like how important is this piece to them, and like that's where the value then comes from. But I mean, the value is subjective. It's subjective in terms of the artist's approach to it, but also the buyer's approach to it.
Right.
Because often, you often, like, for example, I've had situations where I felt, I've actually overpriced this piece. Like, am I asking a little bit too much for this? And then I've been surprised by people, who then, when they learn what the price is, and then they turn to me and go, "That's all?"
Right.
So it's like, it just goes with the nature of art in general, and it's just a subjective, variable world, and it's all about the connection, the conversation, the message, the aesthetic. It all comes together, and at the end of the day, you're either going to connect with the piece or you're not, and you're either going to dig deep and purchase this original artwork or you're not, and it's really not any more complicated than that.
Right. I know we don't have too much more time, and I just want to ask you, because when we embark on this journey, when we talk about mission and accepting the mission, whether you're an artist or an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur or an author or a singer or an actor, at some point you made the decision. At some point you made the decision to go in and kind of take on the mission. Can you share, when was that moment where you're like, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It came after a stint of travel abroad. So I'm from Ireland myself originally, but I've been here in Canada for about 8 years, and I took a break from Vancouver in 2016, and I decided that I was going to go to Australia for a little bit and see a little bit of that side of the world. And I had this this overarching feeling of really wanting to create something or do something or make some kind of mark before I left Vancouver, because at the time I didn't know if I'd ever come back. I had just applied for my permanent residency at the time, but still I never knew if I'd come back, and those first couple of years I spent here really had such an amazing impact, and I had such a great time that I just wanted to mark it. I just wanted to mark that experience in some way. And that's when I just started photographing Vancouver.
Wow.
And that's where it started. It started with the street photography, and just trying to have that moment before I left. And so I did my very first show like 3 days before I got the flight to go to Australia. We did a show at the Beaumont Studios, me and my collaborator. And we put the show up, and I said, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do this before I go, because I know I'm going to be off the radar for 2 years, traveling here or there. And I just said, we've had conversations in the past before where it just comes down to, it's now or never. Just do it. Just go for it. But it takes a lot to get to that point. But when you do, I would just encourage everyone to lean into it when you get there.
Well, as a true Vancouverite, we are so happy to have you.
Thank
and
you,
we're
Deb.
so glad that you came back, and you are such an amazing part of this event. where can people reach you outside of this event? Obviously, you have a booth here, but where can people get in touch with Laura?
Yep, so I have the booth here, but you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, at the Laura Noonan on Facebook. My website, Meet Me at the Lamppost. Actually, you know, if you just type Laura Noonan Vancouver, a couple of things pop up. So you'll find me, I'm out there.
Okay, one last question we always ask. It's just that we are, it's our trademark. You know the question I'm going to
I
ask
know the
you.
question and I
You
know the answer.
question? Oh, you know
Yeah,
the
yeah,
answer?
yeah.
Okay, Desert Island, you're on your way. You have one suitcase. You got room for one album. It is the album that you can't imagine not listening for the rest of your life, my friend. What's it going to be?
You know what, Deb? I don't need the album. I just need the one song.
All right.
And that's Len, my man Leonard Cohen, famously Raincoat, every time.
Absolutely. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing yourself with us today.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks for having me and thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.